create a funny situation instead of relying just on a joke.
Yes.
Now, here's where this comes from. Here's where kind of the whole podcast comes from. Is I was talking to somebody. I was traveling, and I was talking to somebody in another state, and they are awesome children's ministry. You know, they're really great, but they were talking to me about how they don't feel that they are naturally, you know, silly or whatever, and they were like looking at Brother Booker or something, and who is just amazing.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know, I'm not that way.
Sure.
I can't, and so I was like, well, I'm not either. And so and that's kind of where this whole podcast comes from.
Sure.
Is I want to provide some ideas or some thoughts on what can you do if you're not, you know, have a disposition in that regard. So anyway, that's kind of where this comes from. So if you feel like you're like, okay, I can't be silly and crazy or whatever, is instead of depending on the joke, being super funny, like Brother Tyler Hodge, we both know him, being just spontaneous like that. If you can't, then create a situation that's funny. Yeah. And then it's natural. However you respond to it, it's going to be funny because the situation is crazy.
Yeah. So one thing, I'll go back to exaggerating. That is an easy way to go about making a scene funny. Is exaggerate everything you do, especially if you're by yourself. Yeah. So one thing that came to mind, we did Jonah the other day, so we're in between themes right now. So our thank you. So our upstairs is a little crazy. So we did the story of Jonah and the whale, and I was Jonah. Right. Okay, yeah. And at one point, we had a bunch of people on stage, and at one point I was by myself in a fish's belly on stage. Like, how do you do that?
A monologue. Yeah.
Yeah, by yourself in the guts of a fish or whale or whatever. And so at one point, it was me and about 4 or 5 other guys when the storm hit.
When the sailors and stuff.
Yeah.
That was epic in itself.
That was so much fun. And so we're like, okay, we're just going to act like we're on a ship. And we weren't just like, we're dizzy. Oh, I mean, we were like slamming each other.
And go from side to side across the stage.
Yes. From one end of the stage to the other, falling each over, tripping, bouncing. And then on the same token, when I was in the fish's belly and praying and doing that whole thing, when it spit me out, I mean, I'm thinking, man, he spit him out on dry ground, but I went from one side of the stage. In fact, I have a bruise on my leg. One side, because I landed on the edge. One side of the stage to the other. I rolled and bounced and flopped and landed off of the stage, and the kids just were just laughing their head off.
It was,
And it wasn't that I was being like, again, telling a funny joke. I was making the scene funny. I was exaggerating everything.
Exaggerating the whole thing. Yeah, exactly.
And that was fun. I mean, it's a blast for us.
Yeah. Well, and I do think that some stories, maybe not Jonah and the whale, and certainly not like crucifixion or anything like that, but sure. I do think there's some stories that probably were humorous, you know, like, yeah, I mean, the talking donkey, I mean,
can you imagine?
You know, so yeah, I mean, there are things that I guess finding the humor in it, you know, and then if you are in, I mean, so I even wrote a note about absurd situations. So when I wrote that, I was thinking of comedy. But even you think of Jonah in the belly of a whale. Now, there's not much more of an absurd situation than that. I mean, what in the world?
I mean, does a fish just to elaborate, is its stomach full of water inside and out?
Yeah.
Or is it hollow? Is he like up against the spine of the fish just trying to breathe? I mean, you see how it,
Yeah, so absurd. You could totally create that scene. And then what happens is, going back to somebody that's not, have a comic disposition or whatever, is if you just respond to the situation. And I mean, even, we are talking about comedy, but even if you're not worried about comedy, if you just respond to the situation, you're going to engage kids.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to be like, oh, I didn't think about that either. I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah.
Like, what's he doing? Oh, he's in the fish's belly. That's why he's doing that. Or whatever, or spitting out, like you said. And so that's one of those ways with, and the other thing I wrote on the notes there is, your character doesn't know they're in a funny scene.
No.
And so if you like Brennan always does this really good with Sammy. is Sammy's just so funny and does stuff, but Sammy is usually not laughing or trying to be funny.
No. He's just in the moment.
He's in the moment. And he's responding to his situation, which is just hilarious.
It's hilarious, right?
And so he's in these absurd situations, and he's not having to create joke. Now, Brennan is very funny, but when he's doing Sammy, he can just be like, it's also like, I remember hearing a comedian say this once, I think it was Michael Jr., and he was talking about, it was really good. It was something like an unexpected turn or something like that. But he was saying you take the audience, you're basically telling a story, and it takes an unexpected turn. And he gave examples, and I can't remember what they were, but it's just like, you're expecting it to go a certain way, and then it's something.
Yes.
Or like a lot of times they'll do exaggerations, where they're like, and then I pulled out, I don't know, whatever,
Yeah. It's above and beyond.
Yeah. And so that's where, like, changing your bicycle tire and you grab a spare tire out of the trunk of your car or something, just silly stuff, like that. And where the character doesn't know he's in a funny scene. The character's just trying to deal with this,
right.
and it's hilarious
Yeah.
because he's trying to get by.
Yeah.